Hello, I'm Julian Reid, and welcome to the Reid Factor. We're continuing our interview with the British High Commissioner to the Bahamas, Her Excellency Sarah Dixon. High Commissioner, we're living in a different world for sure. And climate change is one of the greatest threats against humankind, I think. Let's hear a little bit about what the UK is doing to try and mitigate its efforts in the fight against climate change.
So I think you've hit the nail on the head. If there's one thing that's going to affect us all in the future, and even now, it's how the climate is changing and how we protect our environment. And the Bahamas seems to be at that kind of crux, really, nexus between climate issues. You suffered obviously a terrible severe weather event last year with Hurricane Dorian, but you've got coral reefs and mangroves and this wonderful biodiversity here, but also you're having to manage shipping and tourism and fishing and all that kind of use of the sea issues, very much like us, in a slightly different way, of course, because we're an island state, but we have...
And people forget that.
...shipping and fishing and tourism issues as well, of a different nature. And the UK is due to host the Conference of the Parties, COP26, which is the next big multilateral climate change meeting. And we were due to have done it now in November 2020, but because of COVID, it's been put off till next year. We are going to host with France and with Italy and the United Nations a ambition conference, a conference to mark the Paris agreements in December of this year, to talk about those next steps ahead of the Conference of the Parties next year. But I think working together on issues around climate and environment, looking at the blue economy and how we use that in a sustainable way, is an area where the UK and the Bahamas have a lot of symmetry and a lot of things in common that we can do together.
Now, a lot of people would say that, the way people react to an issue depends on the kind of leadership they have. And there is good leadership in a way, as far as the climate is concerned. But how are people in the UK reacting to it? Are people really climate friendly in their attitudes for the most part? Or are there still a whole lot of people that you have to convince?
I think this is what makes a big difference in a country, is when the population realises that the actions that we take need to change. And in the UK, I think every household has some kind of obligation to recycle, whether it be paper or glass or plastics. And I know that the Bahamas plastic movement has been doing a lot here to stop the use of single-use plastics, which the government then took and turned into a law.
Absolutely.
And it's difficult when you change your ways and you have to change what you do. But I think people realise that we can't carry on doing the things that we used to do, and meeting targets, whether it be business or households, for emissions and carbon use and what we buy and how we use those things, is becoming every day, I think, something more that the general public as well as governments is accepting as a reality.
I'm going to change it just a little bit now. Well, it's more than just a little bit. But let's talk about the Bahamas' relationship with the monarchy. As you know, Barbados has announced that they are going to become a republic and change the head of state change the Queen as their head of state. Jamaica talked about it for a while, but that seems to be on the back burner now. But there's been an ongoing discussion about it here in the Bahamas. First of all, how does the UK view countries that, like the Bahamas, that are independent but still part of the Commonwealth, deciding to move away from the monarchy and become republics?
So just to be completely clear, this is a decision for the Bahamas. So the Bahamas gets to choose, as an independent sovereign nation, who your head of state is. So the UK has no say in this or role in this at all. And actually the UK-Bahamas relationship is based on a whole lot of other stuff: human relationships, history, things that we have in common. We do share a head of state, but we don't share a head of state with all of the members of the Commonwealth. So the two things aren't directly connected. Exactly.
It's not precedent setting.
No, you don't have to have the Queen as your head of state to be a member of the Commonwealth. So more than half of the Commonwealth do not have the Queen as their head of state. So that bit doesn't change at all, no matter what the Bahamas decides.
You did point out that we are a sovereign state, but there are some Bahamians that feel that because the Queen is our head of state, that we are not. You care to shed a little light on that?
So the Prime Minister is the person who chooses the Governor-General, who represents the Queen here. That's one difference as well between High Commissions and embassies, is I represent the government, whereas normally as an embassy I would represent the Queen. But here the Governor-General represents the Queen and the Prime Minister chooses the Governor-General. So it's very much Bahamian choice to have the Queen as head of state. I listened to the former Attorney General who ran the constitutional panel that looked at this some years ago, and Sean McWeeny, I think his name is, and he was very eloquent in saying that there wasn't an upswell of public opinion, a majority of public opinion pressing for change in this area here in the Bahamas, that people had a lot of other things to worry about, health standards, education standards, the economy, and that this wasn't top of their things to spend a lot of time on list. And I do think any decision like this would come from the people of the Bahamas and come from the Bahamian government. Equally, the Bahamian government haven't said that this is a priority for them at the moment. But I don't think it makes a big difference to how the UK and the Bahamas work together, what we think of each other, and those important topics like health and education and environment that we work on together.
And I agree, that is not the most important thing on the list, and it's also something that might have to go to referendum. And if you've followed the history of referenda in this country recently, I'll leave it like that.
Yes. There are some benefits, I think, with our historic relationship. I know that lots of people here do love the Queen and think she does a terrific job. I also know that our legal systems have a lot in common because of that legacy history together. And I know that the Bahamas also chooses to keep the Privy Council as a court of appeal. Again, the Bahamas could change that if they want to and use the Caribbean Court instead. But it seems to me that those linkages actually must work, or otherwise those changes would happen.
Now, I think the concern about the Privy Council in the most part in the Bahamas is because of the death penalty. That they believe that it's the Privy Council that is stopping us from carrying out executions again. I don't think that that is the case. And I don't think that even if we joined the CCJ that it would be a different outcome. But what are your thoughts about the death penalty? So
I studied criminology at university, and I think that, plus a bit my personal moral views, make me think that institutional killing of people isn't a good idea. It won't stop the crimes happening. If you look at statistically around the world where death penalty exists, it doesn't stop the crimes happening. It's more about vengeance or punishment afterwards. And I know personally I'm proud to come from a country that doesn't institutionally kill people for the wrong they do. I'm a big believer in the fact that if somebody does something wrong, it is right to detain them, imprison, possibly for the rest of their lives. But I personally do not believe that if my government started killing people, I would be comfortable with that, because mistakes happen.
Absolutely. We've had mistakes here in the Bahamas,
and
as far as that's concerned.
And we, in my view, are not God, so we don't decide whether people live or die. That's my view, but I am not sitting on the Privy Council or running the legal system here.
Let's move to gender equality. You are the first female High Commissioner from Britain to the Bahamas,
yes.
I believe,
yes.
And that's a good thing. What do you think from what you've seen so far about gender equality in the Bahamas?
So it is noticeable, because I deal with government, that there aren't very many female politicians. There are a couple, but there aren't many female politicians. Not least because in the UK we have had two female prime ministers in recent history. The gender balance across the House of Commons isn't quite 50-50, but it's more diverse than I see here. And that says probably something about how things work in the Bahamas. Maybe women aren't that interested in politics, or they don't really want to get into it. But I notice it. I have noticed it. There are lots of women in senior positions in the Bahamas. So I don't know. In fact, maybe this is a question back, is trying to understand why that is, and what it means about the role of women in society here is something that, having a High Commission on the ground, hopefully we can understand better. And I would hope that gender equality and equality across the board is something that Bahamians value and respect and would like to see more of.
Can you tell us how the UK has changed after having had 2 female prime ministers over different periods of time, of course? Do you think gender equality is where it needs to be in the UK?
I think equality generally is quite a difficult issue for countries to grapple with. My view on it is it's about respecting people for the quality of their work and their approach to things, rather than making judgments about people because of their gender or other difference, whether it be race or some other factor of their life that means that you're making a judgment about them, not because of what they've done and how they are and what they're capable of, but because of factors that they can't change, like the colour of their skin or their gender. So is the UK perfect in this space? Definitely not. Could we do more? I'm sure of it. But I do know that in my service, in the 25 years I've been in the diplomatic service, I've seen it transform so that now around 30 to 40% of ambassadors are women, whereas before it was more like 3 or 4%. And I think that can only bring positive, diverse change to the way we approach things.
And let's also talk about an issue that in the Caribbean is a challenge for the most part, even though it's still a challenge. LGBT issues. Obviously, it's about accepting people for who they are. But there is this feeling that the industrialized countries, the first world countries, are just trying to push their values on Bahamians and other people in the region. What would you say to that?
So it's a similar view that I have to do with women, actually, which is why judge someone for factors like that? It doesn't make sense to me. Why not instead let people live their lives on the merits of what they are and how they behave? Are they kind? Are they generous? Do they uphold the law? Are they respectful? I mean, these are things that I find much more important than sexual or gender issues. And I thought it was interesting what the Pope said recently. He said that they're all God's children and that you allow people to live their lives and flourish without necessarily oppressing them. And I think that's an important concept. But at the same time, I don't feel that my role here is to tell the Bahamas what to do.
Of course not. No.
So Bahamians will make their own judgments about these things. But what I would hope is that that feeling of respect and tolerance and diversity is something that would flourish in a country that's confident in itself and respectful of other people.
And the thing is, we're in such a challenging time right now. You need to get the best of talent from wherever it comes.
Exactly.
Commissioner, in the middle of a pandemic, you're also dealing with post-Brexit issues. Where is the UK as far as their negotiations is concerned right now?
So this week, as we're talking, there's intensive negotiations going on in London. Lord Frost and Michel Barnier are poring over the texts of an agreement that will define the relationship between the UK and the European Union after the 31st of December, when the transition period finishes. And that agreement is in many ways a free trade agreement with added elements, a bit like the relationship between the UK and the Bahamas in the Economic Partnership Agreement with CARIFORUM countries, where we also talk about services, and it's got regular committees to talk about deepening the relationship or changing elements. And hopefully there should be results from that intensive negotiation period very soon.
How do you see post-Brexit UK affecting the Bahamas?
So I don't know if it will make an awful lot of difference to the relationship between the UK and the Bahamas. There may be a few process changes in how goods or people move between the two, but I mean, I don't think any of it will be very significant. one thing that's true is part of post-Brexit Britain is about looking out to the world and making sure that those linkages with the world that perhaps as part of the European Union we weren't able to spend as much time on or focus on bilaterally and nationally, we'll be able to do more of that. I guess it's part of the reason that there's a new High Commission here in the Bahamas is because we are thinking about that global role that Britain wants to play with its partners and its friends.
You're just heightening it because Britain has always played a role. You've had the ODA here for, well, the ODA is no more, is it? It's now part of the FCO, the FCDO?
So that's right. Basically, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and the the Development Department were put together in September of this year.
Right.
So all aid work around the world plus the political work has been put together in one ministry, a bit like the Canadians and Australians do.
Good. Well, that's great. But let's now talk a little bit more about how the UK does assist the Bahamas in funding and training. And there's a lot more than people would realize.
I think that's right. I think we've always worked with the Bahamas on many issues, even when we didn't have a High Commission here. But I think because we've got a High Commission on the ground, it's much easier for us to spot the opportunities to work together and work more closely on issues. So, for example, Dorian is a good example. When Dorian happened, it was much easier to have a conversation about what the needs here were. And because our policing systems are very similar, we were able to talk to the police about how you manage disaster victim issues, how you process that information with disaster victims. And we were able to help also with the pathology and coroner side of that work. So it's not very glamorous, but we realised that actually what the Bahamas did was quite similar to the UK, and we were able to make some linkages in a forensic space and support with training and equipment and activity together.
And I understand too, right now with COVID-19, the UK is doing quite a bit as well, because we are having this challenge because there are so many people dying at a higher rate, in great part due to COVID, that there are backlogs in the morgue, backlogs at funeral homes. And you are rendering some assistance there as well, aren't you?
Yes, that's correct. We've been able to provide assistance, again with our links with the pathology team, so that we can support those really difficult issues that countries are facing due to both the high capacity in hospitals but also in the morgue. And we've provided some body storage equipment, some PPE, personal protection equipment and other things to help. COVID-19. The UK seems to be, to me, a little bit ahead in the march to finding a vaccine. We know that the US has remdesivir. There's some questions raised about that it may not be as effective as we think it could be. But we've not been hearing that about dexamethasone, which is the UK steroid. We know that the UK, I think in Oxford, they've been working for a long time to develop vaccines in case some unknown kind of virus like what we have now comes up. What are you hearing? Are you hearing how close the UK might be to actually finding a vaccine? Yes, in fact, the Bahamas and the UK are part of an agreement called COVAX,
right,
to allow the distribution of any vaccines across the world. Otherwise, there would be quite a competitive fight for access to vaccines, and COVAX allows a more fair distribution of that, with the WHO playing a role. And yes, you're right, the UK has been at the forefront of vaccine research. The British government has put billions of dollars into developing vaccines and making sure that they're available so that people don't have to worry about this virus anymore and are able to protect themselves and their families from the virus going forward. My understanding is we're in phase 3 trials of the Oxford vaccine that you mentioned, and that's the last phase of trials before you're able to say whether the vaccine works, whether it's safe. So it is progressing at a good speed. I don't think we've got a definitive date for the vaccine being finalised, but it does seem to be progressing well towards getting that vaccine available for people.
Absolutely. Now, what I haven't asked is, And I guess people might say, what can we do? How can the Bahamas help the UK? Are there ways in which we can really help you?
Definitely. I mean, the first, I think, is just through some human-to-human contact. So I think it's clear that when we know each other better, whether it be through tourism or education or trade, that's really leads to kind of better understanding and better relationship between the two countries. So I'm hoping, I think we're all hoping, that those flows of people will be able to start up again. And I know that here there's incredible professionalism in things like financial services and legal services where there's a great interconnection between people. So that's what I'm hoping, is that human dynamic can increase and grow to help understanding of what the modern Bahamas is and what your priorities are. I think another area would be climate and environment. We've talked about this already. Just as we need to cut our carbon emissions and manage our coastal spaces and our forests well, we need the same thing from the Bahamas, and we need to work together on this. Protecting the oceans, making sure that any activity that we carry out as people is sustainable. We can only do that together, so it's an incredible, important area. And I think we learn a lot from the reef management that happens here, and the protection of ocean species as well. David Attenborough did a program called The Blue Planet.
Ah, yeah.
And great chunks of that program were filmed around Bimini and in the Bahamas because of the research that happens here.
If they would only take the kind of action as rapidly as he's asking, we'd be there. But he hasn't given up hope, has he?
No, and he's
neither
90.
should we. Neither should we.
No, he's more than 90 years old and has seen the world. And I think his message about how we can all play our part in protecting the environment is very inspirational.
I've got one more question for you, but I'm going to ask you first if there's anything else you would like to touch on that I haven't asked you.
I suppose one area that we haven't talked about in much detail is the kind of Bahamas ambitions for the future and the way things in the Bahamas will grow. I would love to have more opportunity to talk to young people in particular about how they see the Bahamas developing. I did manage pre-COVID to go to a school on Commonwealth Day. I went to Queen's College at their invitation and talk to people there. And it would be really good to find a way of connecting the High Commission with young people. I wonder if there may be a space in social media for us to make those connections.
I'm sure there is.
I don't know if you think this, Julian, but I know that I find social media as an older person sometimes a bit tricky to navigate and difficult to understand. But things like Facebook and Instagram are a great way, and even WhatsApp are a great way of connecting with people. So I'm hoping that the High Commission can do more in that space with young people going forward.
Now, this isn't the last question, but this just came to my mind as well. Because we've been talking about diversification for a long time, and we're going to have to do it. From your, 10 months here, what areas do you see that we could and should be looking at as new economic ventures for the Bahamas?
Yes, I mean we talked a little bit in your previous program about trade issues.
Right.
And I do think that the natural beauty and the ability for natural products here to be exported is something that's probably untapped. I think that the Bahamas has quite often said that in the agriculture space it would like to allow more people to be involved in that industry and grow what happens. So I believe that there is scope to export more of those goods to the UK, and I think working together we can identify that. Particularly smaller companies, don't you think that one of the things we've learnt from COVID is that these smaller industries can grow out of nothing, people making masks who never did before, or doing delivery work or e-commerce who weren't able to before. I think that's a really important area for both of our countries to allow those smaller companies to grow and be sustainable and give livelihoods to people who are otherwise struggling.
Absolutely. Now, you've, like I said, only been here about 10 months. Since we've been open for 10 months. You've completed the first phase, let's say. You've got the High Commission up and running. You're doing some things, obviously not all you intended to do. When you come to the end of your tour of duty in the Bahamas, what would Sarah Dixon like to say? Yeah, I've accomplished this, and this makes a big difference.
Well, to be honest, the first thing is functioning buildings with staff and phone lines. I don't know if your audience will think the same, but it can be quite tricky to get things done. And I have spent a lot of time trying to just make sure we've got the right things in the right place at the right time. But the second part, of course, is those human relationships. So making sure that the view that people have of Britain is the modern Britain that I know, the diverse, outward-looking, modern Britain that really, I think sometimes when I talk to Bahamians, they've got a slightly old-fashioned view of how the UK was, probably because we haven't had a High Commission here in years. But you know, the Britain of the 21st century is a much more dynamic, creative place that I'm quite proud of. And I'd love to increase that understanding of Britain in the Bahamas, and then vice versa, help Britain understand the Bahamas and where it's coming from.
Well, I'm quite certain that you will. Sarah Dixon, the British High Commissioner to the Bahamas, it's really been wonderful chatting with you, and thank you for being on the Reid Factor.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Good. And we'll see you next time.